The lights of Jimmy Kimmel Live glowed brighter than usual that night. The audience buzzed with excitement as Jimmy Kimmel teased his next guest, a living legend whose name alone carried decades of cinematic history. When Harrison Ford finally walked onto the stage, the applause was thunderous. He smiled, waved casually, and gave that familiar half-grin that fans had loved since the days of Star Wars and Indiana Jones. At first, everything felt normal, comfortable even. Jimmy joked about Ford's long career, poking gentle fun at how he had survived spaceships, ancient curses, and collapsing bridges. Harrison responded with dry wit, the kind that made the audience laugh a beat later because they weren't sure if he was joking or being serious. It was classic Harrison Ford energy, but beneath the surface something felt off. Jimmy began steering the conversation toward Harrison's age, joking about how many action heroes from Ford's era were still running around saving the world. The audience laughed, but Harrison's smile tightened just slightly. He brushed it off with a sarcastic remark, and for a moment the tension dissolved. Then Jimmy pulled out an old clip, one Harrison clearly hadn't expected. It showed a behind-the-scenes moment from years ago, where Ford appeared visibly annoyed during an interview. Jimmy laughed and said, "You've always been grumpy, Harrison. That's kind of your brand, right?" The audience laughed again, louder this time. Harrison leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I wouldn't call it a brand," he replied calmly. "I'd call it being honest." Jimmy nodded, but he didn't stop. He joked about Ford hating interviews, fans, and even some of his own movies. Each comment landed like a small tap, nothing outrageous on its own, but together they began to stack up. The studio laughter masked the shift in energy, but those watching closely could see it in Harrison's eyes. Jimmy leaned forward, smiling. "Come on, Harrison, admit it. You hate doing these shows." There was a pause. Harrison looked at Jimmy, then at the audience, and back again. "I don't hate doing shows," he said slowly. "I hate being misunderstood." The laughter softened, unsure this time. Jimmy chuckled nervously and tried to pivot, but the mood had changed. The playful banter now felt like a tightrope. Harrison's posture was stiff, his tone measured. Whatever easy charm had opened the interview was fading, replaced by something heavier, something unresolved. And Jimmy, sensing the tension but choosing to push forward anyway, was about to cross a line no one expected. Jimmy adjusted his cue cards, pretending everything was fine. The audience settled, waiting for the next joke, the next laugh. But this time, Jimmy's curiosity got the better of his judgment. "So," Jimmy said casually, "people say you're difficult to work with. Directors, co-stars, even fans. Does that bother you, or do you kind of enjoy that reputation?" The room went quiet. Harrison didn't answer immediately. He stared at Jimmy, his expression unreadable. A few nervous chuckles echoed through the audience, but they quickly died out. "Why would I enjoy that?" Harrison asked. Jimmy shrugged, smiling. "I don't know, some stars lean into it. Makes them more mysterious." Harrison exhaled slowly. "You're talking about real people." "Real work, not a character." The tension was now unmistakable. Cameras zoomed in, catching every subtle movement of Ford's face. Jimmy tried to lighten the moment, but it was too late. Then Jimmy pushed further. "You've had legendary roles, sure," he said. "But some people think you'd be more likable if you smiled more. Ever think about that?" The audience gasped. Harrison's jaw tightened. For a long second, he said nothing. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. You could hear someone cough in the crowd. "I didn't come here to be liked," Harrison finally said. "I came here to talk about my work." Jimmy laughed awkwardly. "Hey, I'm just saying what people online say." Harrison shook his head. "That's the problem. You're giving a microphone to nonsense." The room felt frozen. This was no longer banter. This was confrontation. Jimmy attempted to recover, joking, "Wow, okay. Tough crowd tonight, or tough guest?" That did it. Harrison leaned forward, hands on the armrests of his chair. "You invited me here," he said firmly. "Not the internet. If you don't have respect for the person sitting in front of you, maybe you shouldn't do this job?" A collective gasp swept through the studio. Jimmy's smile faded. He tried to respond, but Harrison stood up before he could. The band stopped playing. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. "I've been doing this a long time," Harrison said, voice steady but clearly controlled. and I don't need this. With that, he took a step back, nodded briefly toward the audience, not Jimmy, and turned toward the exit. The cameras kept rolling. As Harrison Ford walked off the stage, the studio erupted into chaos. Some audience members applauded out of instinct, others sat frozen in disbelief. Jimmy stood there, stunned, cue cards dangling uselessly in his hand. The band hesitated, then softly began to play, unsure whether to fill the silence or not. Jimmy finally spoke. Well, that just happened. But the moment had already escaped his control. Backstage, sources would later say Harrison didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He simply walked, calm but clearly done. Years of experience had taught him when a conversation was no longer worth having. On stage, Jimmy tried to salvage the show. He cracked a joke about commercial breaks and awkward moments, but it didn't land. The audience energy was gone. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something real, something unscripted. Within minutes, social media exploded. Clips of the walk-off spread like wildfire. Some praised Harrison for standing up for himself, calling it a rare moment of dignity in a media world obsessed with cheap laughs. Others criticized Jimmy for pushing too far, arguing that the line between humor and disrespect had been crossed. By the next morning, headlines screamed about the incident. Harrison Ford walks off live TV. Jimmy Kimmel under fire. A Hollywood legend draws the line. Neither man released an immediate statement. That silence only added to the suspense. Fans debated whether the walk-off was justified or overblown. Industry insiders whispered about unwritten rules, about how far a host should go, and how much a guest should tolerate. The moment became more than just a viral clip. It became a conversation about respect, boundaries, and the cost of turning real people into punchlines. In the end, one thing was clear. Harrison Ford didn't walk off because of a joke. He walked off because, in that moment, the joke stopped being funny and started being personal. And for a man who had spent a lifetime playing heroes who stood their ground, this was one role he didn't need a script for. The screen faded to black, and the audience, both in the studio and around the world, was left wondering, was this just a TV moment or a turning point?